This is a rose hip, and I am the roaming rogue researcher on the rose hip road trip. I have a rose between my hips, lows on my lips, and I am hip to the power of plants. Each day I chant to invoke their spirits. Can you hear it?
The rose hip road trip.
This is a rose hip, and I am the roaming rogue researcher on the rose hip road
Hey everyone,
trip.
this is Dr. Hilary Booker, the roaming rogue researcher, and this is the Rose Hip Road Trip. So don't forget to put your thinking caps on, kids, because the journey to freedom is long. And ultimately, it takes all of you, meaning that it will take each and every one of you. It takes each and every one of us. And also, it takes each and every piece of each and every one of us to ensure that freedom is possible for everyone, because everything is connected and we are all connected. As the Aboriginal abolitionist movement in Australia quote says, quote, "If you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you've come because your liberation is bound up in mine, then let us walk together." End quote. If there's someone out there who really understands this concept, it's the person you're going to hear from today, Owen Taylor of True Love Seeds in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Owen is a farmer and seed saver, a food educator, a teacher of emancipatory education, a musician, artist, activist, and community builder who is deeply passionate about helping people learn about and preserve their cultural heritages through food and seeds. He both helps and forces people to answer the question, what are the seeds of my people? His work and his presence force people to ask questions like, what is my culture? And who are my ancestors? As he mentions in this interview, his work causes people of European ancestry to interrogate this, quote, mythical white culture, end quote, that is problematic on so many fronts. Owen is a connector. He connects people, he connects ideas, he connects people to their food, and in many ways, he connects people to themselves through his work. His network is broad and deep, spanning from coast to coast and beyond. I highly recommend visiting him on Instagram at the handle Seedkeeping, which is both a gorgeous and educational feed. You can also check out his website, www.trueloveseeds.com, where you can order heirloom seeds from him and others in his network, as well as their amazing seed calendar. If you're planning on planting anything this season, I hope you'll check them out and support the work, because when you order and buy seeds from a seed exchange such as True Love Seeds, you're supporting biodiversity, you're supporting the preservation of food cultures and languages, you're supporting farmers who are growing using ecologically coherent methods, and you're building community. So even if you don't order from True Love Seeds, please do some research and find seed savers in your community or at another seed exchange. There are quite a few around the country, and I bet you can find one by asking around at your local farmer's market. As always, thank you for your support of the Rose Hip Road Trip. You can stay up to date with my whereabouts by following Rose Hip Road Trip on Instagram, Facebook, and by going to www.instituteforearthbasedliving.com/Rose Hip Road Trip. The Rose Hip Road Trip is a project of the Institute for Earth-Based Living. It's beautiful, it's earthy, it's disruptive, and it seeks to be an integral part of raising the consciousness of all creation through earth-based healing. Please check out Institute for Earth-Based Living on Instagram and Facebook for morning memos, intuitive messages to help guide your day and your life. If you find them helpful and you're seeking guidance and support along your journey in a safe and supportive space, please consider scheduling an intuitive restoration session, and we will work together to ensure that you find the clarity you need to move forward, no matter what. Thank you for listening. Enjoy this interview with Owen Taylor, and check out the Institute for Earth-Based Living's YouTube channel to see video of the interview and the beautiful landscape of Owen's farm. Have a beautiful week, everyone.
So, mainly I'm growing seed crops,
Okay.
but also flowers
Mm-hmm.
for bouquets and or medicinal herbs as well.
Okay.
So most of what you'll see in here is for seed, but for example, all the dahlias are for
Right.
cut flowers, and got lots of tulsi, and that whole garden where you parked is medicinal herbs. Oh yeah, so I was telling you about what brought me to seed.
Right.
So yeah, William Moyes Weaver was my mentor for the last 4 years,
Okay.
and he's written many books on heirloom seeds, on foodways, particularly Pennsylvania Dutch foodways.
Okay.
That's his background.
Right.
And I spent time kind of helping him organize his collection,
Yeah.
continue to do what he'd been doing for 40 years.
Right.
And, oh, that's great. And helping him scale up so that he could sell some of the seeds as
Yeah.
a way to bring in income and support for the project. Meanwhile, I met some awesome farmers on the eastern shore of Maryland, actually,
Okay.
who wanted to start a collective of farmers up
Mhm.
and down the East Coast
Mhm.
focused on seeds.
Nice.
And the main instigator is Blaine Snipstall, who is of Black Dirt Farms. And he had been to the White Earth Reservation in Minnesota to an indigenous farming conference, and had kind of heard the call from some of the indigenous seed keepers to go back to, his own community and start his own seed keepers network.
Yeah.
And to him, this is where I heard the term seed keeping first,
Okay.
which is my online profile.
Right.
But he, the seed keepers, indigenous seed keepers, include not just the act of saving the seeds in their work, but the act of saving the culture,
Right.
traditions, and the rituals, and the stories, and the recipes, along with that
Yeah.
genetic material. So it's much deeper than kind of just propagating plants. It's about kind of propagating culture and
Yeah.
preserving culture.
Can you talk about that, or how that how that affects your work, or how you incorporate that into your own work?
Sure. I mean, to me, that makes it much deeper and much more powerful to be reconnecting with my own food culture,
Yeah.
ancestrally, but also working with so many groups around the country who are doing the same thing, and sharing back what I've learned at the Roughwood Seed Collection and beyond around seed keeping, and helping folks who are already preserving their culture through food take it to the next level with preserving seeds
Right.
as well.
And it takes it from kind of to the next level of actually preserving and conserving, right? Not just the knowledge, but then actually figuring out how to sort of save that in a way
Yeah, exactly.
and pass it on.
Exactly. And so how that's kind of shaped my project is that I've identified, for the last 10, 15 years, I've worked with urban and some rural food sovereignty
Okay.
projects.
And where have you done that?
I started in San Francisco
Okay.
briefly while I was in school, and working with some groups in the Bay Area. And when I moved to New York City after that, I worked in food justice organizations, specifically Just Food. It was
Right, yeah, I know Just Food.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I worked there for 7 years.
Okay.
If you include my chicken internship.
Nice.
Started it all. And so in that work, I've been able to meet people really all over the world
Yeah.
doing similar work, making
Yeah.
sure that people are able to kind of control their breadbasket, so to speak, so that they're kind of in control of their destiny. That's what one of my other mentors, Abu Talib, says. He who controls your breadbasket controls your destiny.
Yes.
So thinking about how communities are able to make their own decisions and grow their own food, and now save the seeds for that food so they don't have
Right.
to rely on other people for that. And so within those networks, I've been able to talk to friends and colleagues and people who I really look up to and say, hey, I'm starting a seed catalog. Are you interested in providing some varieties that are important to your community in the catalog as a way to bring in money, but also as a way to tell your story? in a very tangible way, through sharing the seeds that you grew. So that's how it's kind of, I forget what your original question was, but that's kind of how it's manifested in my work now,
Right.
around the importance of keeping the culture. I think it's important for people to tell their own stories. Like I said, a lot of what I'm growing here comes from stories that are not my own, but a lot of them do. And I think that's really important to be able to tell your story. And so I'm working with, for example, some urban food sovereignty projects like Nuestras Raíces and Polio.
I'm very familiar with them.
Say that again?
I'm very familiar with them.
Yeah, they're growing a couple Puerto Rican crops for the seed catalog, gandules and ají dulce peppers. And I'm working with a bunch of local groups here, like Viet Lead,
Okay.
who focuses on Vietnamese varieties.
Okay.
The elders run their project in Camden. They also have youth, so they're growing a bitter melon, for example, for the catalog. And various refugee groups, including them, and folks from Burma, and a farmer friend of mine in California who has a rural farm. She lives in Oakland, but commutes to her rural farm where she's growing a Korean melon. She's Korean, from the town she grew up in. That's also a site of resistance. The U.S. military base is trying to expand,
establish itself
in
there, yeah.
their area, and the main industry there is melon farming, and it's mainly women farmers. And so she's growing this melon from that town as a way both to share this delicious cantaloupe. It's not really a cantaloupe, it's
Right.
the striped yellow and white Korean melon, but also tell that story and support the resistance to that military base. And so so as I've thought about, okay, why am I doing this? What am I trying to do? I thought, okay, I want to support projects like hers that's already doing amazing work in the community,
Right.
and shed a light on that work, and also
Right.
bring in an income opportunity through seed sales. But I'm also hoping just for general support as people read about these projects.
Right.
They want to find out more and see how
Right.
they can support. My partner runs a farm with an African diaspora garden attached
Nice.
to it. And he's growing a bunch of beans from the Mississippi Delta area where he grew up, but also crops of the African diaspora, things that have become important in the new world. And then I'm also, as I keep alluding to, growing this is an Italian black-eyed pea, which is called Fagiolina del Trasimeno. I hope I'm saying it right. Part of me growing these things is showing me how much I still need to learn about my ancestral culture. But this is a beautiful little black, you can see it's swarming with wasps because they're after the nectar that still pumps out after the flower leaves. But it's this little beautiful bean, tiny black-eyed pea.
Oh, wow.
And it's endangered. It's from Umbria. You can see it's covered in pods, but they ripen just a few at a time, which makes it really hard for mechanical agriculture.
Yep.
And hard for me.
Right, I was safe. Regardless,
every day. But it's a delicious bean, and it's really important to that area, and so slow food.
Well, and that is, the birthplace of slow food, right? So.
And this is really literally slow food.
Yeah.
It took forever. But I've been growing it for a few years, and Slow Food identified it as an important crop to that area. So they're doing agritourism.
Okay.
And working with restaurants and universities and around that area to try to support farmers growing this bean, this black-eyed pea. And I'm also growing an Italian eggplant, an Italian butternut squash, and some Irish cabbage and potatoes, and working with a lot of rural farmers with various European ancestries and asking them the same questions I'm asking everybody else, like what's your cultural food? I think it's important for everyone to bring something to the table. So it's been a challenge for some people, and some people who haven't completely assimilated into this kind of mythical white culture have been able to access their ancestral foods from their grandparents and grow those seeds. So it's been a cool exercise. All of the farmers I'm working with, this is their first year saving seeds.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
In a large scale way.
Yeah. So when's the catalog coming out?
As soon as possible.
Okay.
I'm hoping November at the latest.
Okay.
It means,
It's tough putting together a catalog and farming at the same
it
time.
really is. It means germination testing all the
Right.
varieties, which means getting them from all the growers.
Right.
And myself.
Yeah, that's a huge project.
Yep. And then, designing the catalog and the website,
Yeah.
etc. Building a store, stuff like that. Printing seed packets and packing them. There's a lot that's going to happen in the next 2 months.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
So, hopefully November, if not sooner.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So this project, part of it is about earth-based practices, and one of the things that I'm hoping to do with this project is to create a sort of new definition, or maybe a definition for what does earth-based mean. So when you hear that term, what comes to mind for you?
Well, first I think of other...
And especially in terms of how it relates to what you do personally.
Right. I follow various agroecological practices. I follow various natural farming practices.
And what types of practice, when you say that, how would you define that? Or
Well, for example, for most of this field, I went no-till this year, where I didn't use the rototiller even. There's areas that were grass last year that I did till, but the areas where I had grown already, there was no need to till. And so I, did this all by solarization.
Okay.
So I would kind of chop the residue down to the soil level with a weed whacker or a hoe, and then cover it with plastic, not super earth friendly.
Right.
But it
That's
helped
okay.
me, it helped me to
There's
not,
always a balance, right?
Right. We drove our cars here. There's contradictions. So I put down clear plastic for a few days in 70+ degree weather, and that just zapped the surface level, which means I didn't have to clear away the crop residue or weeds, but incorporated it into the soil. And then I put down a layer of compost and maybe some mulch on top of that and plant right into it. And so that means that the soil structure doesn't get completely destroyed, which means airflow can continue, water flow can continue, all the microbes and macroorganisms don't get destroyed in that process. And so for me, that also means I don't bring all the weed seeds up to the surface, which are just like waiting, sleeping in the soil.
Right.
Whenever you till up the soil, you're exposing these dormant weed seeds, and so the weed pressure in here has been much lower. It looks really packed in here, and I might reconsider next year how close I plant things, but the upside has been not a lot of weed pressure, because I'm not exposing the weed seeds by doing no-till,
Right.
but I'm also planting so that things fill in. Maybe I'll hoe once, if that. And then right around this time of year, I'm going through and doing like the first hand weeding, which is amazing compared
That's
to
huge,
previous
yeah.
years. So for me, that's natural farming, that's earth-based farming. Like literally, I'm not disturbing the earth.
Right. You're letting its own cycles do what they do.
Letting it breathe, letting the ecosystem stay intact. And so that's been wonderful. I learned that from Tobacco Road Farm in Connecticut, where I'm from. I worked a couple seasons, and they've gone no-till. They're using a Korean natural farming method called indigenous microorganisms, where you culture up the forest microbes in rice, and then in barley and molasses, and then introduce them into the field. And their forest microbes are more fungally dominant, and a lot of times that's really beneficial to the field, which is more bacterially dominant. So I'm working my way up. Every year I'm like, okay, this is the year I put the box of rice in the forest, and it's just like, I didn't get to it. I also planted for all spring and early summer by the moon, so I guess that's moon-based farming.
Yeah.
But the moon impacts the earth. And so kind of following the cycles, following various moon calendars, to try to be in touch with the kind of phases of the moon and how that impacts water and growth.
Yeah.
And so that was wonderful. Once mid-May hit and I was out here just rushing to get everything in, kind of my systems I had put in place kind of went out the window. So I stopped following the moon calendar, but it's just a practice that I'm hoping to build over the years. So, yeah, and I don't use any chemicals. Um, I try to do integrated pest management.
Mm-hmm.
This area is out of control. This was squash, corn, and more squash. And then there's amaranth.
Yeah, I see the
I had 4
amaranth.
rows of squash, and I planted the amaranth right down the middle of each because the squash, the cucumber beetles prefer amaranth.
Okay.
And so even literally as I placed the plant in the row to bury it, the cucumber beetles were jumping onto it. And so to me that was a way to distract, and it worked.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, they immediately left the plants alone.
That's wonderful.
I'm still learning, because then later we got the squash bugs and they
Right.
took a major toll. But I try to kind of work with nature instead of against it. So,
Fantastic.
yeah.
On our brief phone conversation, you mentioned that you feel like this is a spiritual practice for you, or there's something spiritual about it. Can you expand on that?
Oh, sure. It's not something I've talked about much, but I've taken cues from a lot of other farmers
Yeah.
who really bring their spirituality into their practice, including my partner.
Okay.
And for me, it's really great to come out here alone in the morning, and be with the land, and kind of take inspiration and kind of help. The land helps me also focus on my own intuition. I actually spent the morning here this morning kind of thinking through the symbolism of this land as I think about how to kind of portray my project. I was suddenly surrounded by hummingbirds. They
Oh,
were
that's
beneath my arms,
amazing.
and, it was beautiful. I mean,
They were
drink-
coming to tell you.
There's a lot of flowers that they drink here, from the runner bean to the canna lilies to the zinnias to the dahlias. It was really beautiful. And then the goldfinches eat the sunflower seeds. But anyway, spirituality. I've always had kind of a private spiritual practice with the land since I was a kid, with my own huge garden, but also growing up in the forest.
Yeah.
I would spend hours and hours with it. So for me, that's just an important part of my well-being, is being kind of recharged and inspired by the natural world,
Yeah.
which is really everywhere. You can't escape the natural world
Right.
in the city.
Right.
It's so nice to be in a space like this and
Yeah.
surrounded by forest and seeing the health of this land. So, one thing that I try to do is thank the land. Respect the space that I'm in. Another practice I've adopted from my partner is, his father is also a farmer, and he
Okay.
puts the seeds that he's planting in his mouth first
Yeah.
before he plants them, as a way to kind of acclimate them to your
Yeah.
needs, and to you, so that
Right.
they're producing for
Right.
you.
I love that.
Which I found a beautiful practice, and I just started really noticing that each seed felt different. I don't
Yeah.
mean the texture, I mean
Right.
the energy of it.
Yes.
And I can almost tell when it's has a lot of vitality in it
Mm.
still, just by somehow the feeling. I have a lot of practices like that with the
Okay.
land. I mean, similar. There's a creek here.
Okay.
I meant to tell you to bring your bathing suit. But I spend a lot of time in the creek, especially in the hottest days, and part of that feels extremely spiritual. as well.
Absolutely.
That's the water that's percolated through this land. It's also feeding back into this land. And so to be kind of literally immersed in kind of the water of this land is really powerful. It's inspired me. I'm also a musician, and since the creek in particular has really inspired some of my most recent songs, just
Okay.
because it's such a powerful spiritual experience to be in
Yeah.
there.
What kind of music do you perform?
It's acoustic duo. I'm in an acoustic duo.
Oh, nice.
We've been together almost a decade.
Wow, that's
We just made our
fantastic.
4th album.
Awesome.
So it's a big part of my life, but it's always secondary to farming. So it's nice that sometimes they combine to kind of take an inspiration from the land
Yeah.
into the music. And usually when we tour, we visit lots of other farms.
Okay.
That's who my
Right.
people are.
Right.
So.
Do you have like a touring schedule online, or how
Usually
can
if
one
we keep
find?
up with it, we actually just finished all of our dates that we had for this summer.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll make some more for the fall. Yeah, we're called My Gay Banjo.
Nice.
Mhm.
That's a great name.
And this most recent album has just become very political because of the times we're living in. Which is great. We've been trying to combine our work, our activism and organizing to our art for a while.
Okay, so can you talk about your winter job, which is teaching classes, and the types of classes that you're teaching?
Sure. So in the winter, I usually teach, well, for the last 6 or 7 years, I've taught something called the Training of Trainers for Farm School in New York City, which comes out of a training that was led by Just Food, where I previously worked, and originally came from Heifer International. And it focuses on how we lead workshops in a participatory way, hands-on way, that is based in the lived experience of the people who are in the classroom.
It's a novel concept.
Yes, instead of a top-down, lecture-heavy technique, which we all are familiar with for the most part, if we went through traditional schooling in this country,
Yep.
it's offering techniques that actually pull from the learners, their questions, their lived experience, and also what they hope to do and what they plan to do when they leave the classroom. So going from where they started and where they will be at the end. And so it sounds like a cool concept, but a lot of people don't know how to implement it. And so this class is kind of both focused on some of the mechanics of it and then lots of practice with it.
Nice.
So after they've been through the course, we have them kind of do it for the rest of the participants.
This is a rose hip, and I am the roaming rogue researcher on the rose hip road trip. I have goddesses in my hips, I go to herbs to get my tips, and my food even makes fairies do flips.
The rose hip road trip.
This is a rose hip, and I am the roaming rogue researcher on the rose hip road trip. I let the wind determine my clip. I stay away from air with too much nip, and if you need some vitamin C, take a sip from my tea.
The rose